Liquidity, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Let's just get right into this, yeah? Recently, we've seen a real shift from competition to collaboration between banks and fintechs. And I mean, I can tell you tons of stories about we're going to disrupt this and disrupt that. It's not going to happen. Collaboration is going to be way more important. What is the driving change across the financial? What's driving that change, you think, across the financial ecosystem where collaboration becomes way more important than people trying to disrupt?
I think it all is on client demand, right? What does the client need today? Today we have a content creator sitting in a village in Vietnam asking a big media house to send him money from US. How does that happen, right? We as banks can get scale, we can get trust, we can get a regulatory reliability in how money moves. But then when you need to reach the end consumer, you need to be technically advanced, you need to be agile, you need to have niche innovations which makes this fast, real time to them. And I think that's where fintechs and banks can come together and play a role. Today, the way financial industries evolved, it's just not about who's going to win the race, right? It's about how can you make the ecosystem successful to meet this client demand. And that's where I think fintechs and banks have to collaborate to make this successful.
I completely agree. And it's funny, I mean, the pie is big enough for everyone to play in it.
And it's getting bigger as well.
Sandpit or whatever you want to say. But, from my perspective, I mean, it's interesting, Kriti. I think as we sort of built our relationship together, I mean, very much the early conversations is about how do we partner, what is it that we can help also deliver for you guys, right? In terms of what you guys are focusing on. So some of the example that you just gave around how do we actually work with, your merchant base, right? To bring some value to, your clients. So we very much see bank partners as true partners for what we do at Finmo as well.
Yeah.
Do you think there was a mindset change inside of big institutions at some point where everyone was like, you know what, instead of trying to fight them off, maybe if we just invite them in, it can be
absolutely.
better? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. We always thought about controlled treasury, centralized treasury, and I think that's changed. It's now about how do we do treasury with ecosystem connect? So it can't be one bank leading it or three banks leading it. It's just impossible to have the geographical reach and that client demand of instant, real-time, 24/7. I need to know where my payment is in 2 seconds, just alone.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, same philosophy at Finmo, right? I mean, from our point of view, spending the last few decades in various payment companies, we knew that we actually wanted to bring these bank components together, right? And so that's what we sort of focus on. It's not one bank, it's several banks. And, we look to partner with all of them, basically, from our perspective. One real small story.
Go for it.
So a very, very large enterprise client who will remain unnamed.
Nameless.
Again, very surprised in terms of this speed, agility thing, right? So, we went over to the US, to meet with them, etc. And so one of the things is how can we do this money movement thing better or whatever the case is? And we're like, well, we can deliver these services to you, but actually, don't you have this internally already? Yes, we do, but it's sitting over here in perhaps another business or whatever the case is. So the other point that I'll make is
interesting.
It's always about, thinking through kind of different ways of innovating, different ways of bringing, new technology to the table, what have you. But, large organizations also struggle with this. Right?
Yeah,
it's not just the small, it's not just the large. I think everyone's trying to figure out how do I prioritize different effort? How do I focus on the right things? And we see that across the base as well.
And I think that's where we're here to make a difference, because we've seen some really, really large payment companies in this space who started maybe 10 years back.
Right.
If you look at their treasury, right?
Yeah.
They're sitting on 1,500 accounts,
Yeah.
logging into 100
Right.
online banking systems
Right.
Yeah.
to pull
All
up
separate and fragmented.
all separate.
Yeah.
So I was just talking to someone and he said, I have 10 treasury people in my team.
Yeah.
They're all on different banking logging systems,
Right.
trying to pull up the report.
Refreshing.
Has the money coming. And we, and the reason we work a lot we've created this team and we work with a lot of fintechs is to say,
Yeah.
you know what, you don't need 1,500 accounts. I can give you 4 accounts. I
Yep.
can give you one banking system.
Right.
We can integrate with your ERP and you can get all of it together. It's very good to start early.
So you've made a lot of really good points about multiple bank accounts, all these sort of fragmented systems and stuff like that. We've talked a little bit about how it comes together, but talk to me in more detail about cash visibility, why it's so important, and where it works together for both of you.
No, absolutely. Look, it's the central thing of what we do, right, for our merchants. Really, it starts with aggregating sort of cash visibility for our merchants. So whether that be, different bank accounts around the region and globe, it's all about, how do I get that insight into my cash balance, right? From there, what I can do is actually use also that data for downstream sort of planning purposes, right? Whether it be cash flow forecasting, better capital management optimization, yield, invest products. We talked a little bit about the MMF, etc. I think for us, it's about how do we connect into sort of the banking infrastructure. We love working with banks that are API driven, that are open, etc. And look, I admit that, around the region, that there's varying level of maturity around that, right? Some banks are perhaps still, host to host, file upload capability, etc. But what we're seeing is more digitization from banks. And what we do is we tend to work with the top 2-3 banks in each of the markets.
Right.
So we cover off on 70 to 80% of the market. But really what that's about, again, is about connecting the banks in, getting the visibility and doing the downstream treasury workflow management.
And we just enable that. So if you look at today the financial landscape or even the corporate landscape, there are various people who are operating, like you mentioned, host to host. A lot of larger corporates want host to host. Some of them which are still fragmented will still log into an online portal. And then now the API connectivities come. I think what we are enabling is we of course have the systems which can give you complete visibility, can get you cash pooling done in the locations that you want. How do you move restricted currencies? How do you actually do real-time movement of money? How do you do just-in-time funding? All of that is very data driven. So what are the key things? You need to have the right APIs in place. You need to have the right reportings through the APIs that you need. You need data standardization.
Absolutely.
And you need to be able to enter 20, 35 countries with the similar specs.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't come to David and say, hey, you want to get into 14 countries? Let me send you 20 different API specs to integrate with. It'll probably take 2 years, right?
We could probably do a bit faster than that.
but still, if standardization occurs on your side,
Yes.
then serving it, that standardization
Exactly.
becomes easier on Finmo's side.
API
That's right.
enablement, what do you need? The reporting, etc. How can we get more advanced?
Yeah.
I mean, now we're getting into the whole blockchain smart contract space.
Absolutely.
How much information can be provided there? How can you run your entire compliance processes on one smart contract instead of having it in 10 different countries every time the money hits the account,
I mean, now we're getting into some geeky space, as I call it. We can probably go on for the next 2
gonna-
hours.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know
we
that
could
we
do
have the
an
time.
entire show on-
But just a
smart
small point on
contracts,
that. I
please
mean,
comment on it.
really, I think we see that space as, like, I call it rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same
yeah.
stuff, different underlying technology,
Yeah.
right? The blockchain, etc. And yes, it's public. So there's a question mark of like corporates, whether they want to put their treasury on the public blockchain or whatever the case is. But if you look at it from a technology perspective, wallet infrastructure, similar to an account, right? It's really, from our point of view, just a currency conversion from, a new world back into the old world, or vice versa, right? So I think we see it the same way.
And the fact that you can make it very modular.
Yeah.
We're far away from one model fits all.
For sure.
I think it's very important to make everything modular so the client can pick and choose what they can do. I think Finmo does that beautifully, and we are learning from Finmo.
We try our best.
So we've also started putting, it's not about getting the product. Like Treasury was always like, what product do you want? Let me give the product to them. I think it's just about what solution do you want?
How can we help you solve this problem?
That's
Absolutely.
our ethos, Let's get the solution.
But in all seriousness, I mean, we are very modular. I think from our perspective, you can take cash visibility, you can take forecasting, you can take FX, you can take integration into our accounting software. You can take all of it or none of it or some of it.
Yeah.
I think for us, we're solving different problems for different merchants, right? To exactly your point. So it's not a one size fits all. And I think the other thing is, clients want a bit of flexibility in terms of how they actually
Yeah.
integrate, whether it be APIs, whether it be through the portal in a no-code solution or whatever the case is. We can deliver that too. Interestingly, just last point is there's a lot coming up around data localization, right?
Yeah.
And whether or not we can provide an instance of the Treasury platform into a particular country or whatever the case is.
Right,
And
because
so
they want to have
something-
their data sovereignty.
Yeah.
That's something else that we're solving for our merchants as well.
Okay, you guys have been amazing. Thank you again, Kriti Jain, David Hanna.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.